subtle low hum like distant wind through an alleyway, almost a whisper that raises the hairs on your neck. The slow, deliberate pacing of footsteps, each one a heavy beat of anticipation, drawing closer. The faint, almost imperceptible creak of a door that isn't quite closed. Sometimes the worst nightmares aren't the ones we dream, the fleeting terrors that dissolve with the morning light, but the ones we live through while wide awake. They are the chilling whispers in the dark, the unheeded cries that echo into an abyss of indifference, the silent pleas for help that go unanswered. These are the stories of ordinary people who, in their darkest hour, did everything right. They picked up the phone, they reported the danger, they pleaded for protection, for intervention, for a simple act of humanity, but help never came. And what happened next still haunts those who survived, leaving them forever scarred by the terrifying vacuum of neglect. And for those who didn't, well, their silence is the loudest accusation of all. Soft ticking clock, almost imperceptible, then silence. A faint, almost imperceptible creaking sound, like a floorboard settling or a distant door opening just a crack. The sound of a single, slow drip of water. I was a neighbor just across the hall from Lauren Giddings. Our apartments were mirror images, separated by a thin wall and a shared hallway, a space where the mundane often brushed shoulders with the extraordinary. She was a beacon of promise, a bright, determined law student in Macon, Georgia, her future shimmering with the undeniable potential of a truly brilliant mind. We'd talk sometimes on the stairs, brief but pleasant exchanges, snippets of conversation about classes, about life, about the small joys of everyday existence. She was sharp, focused, always smiling, a warm, genuine smile, but with an intensity in her eyes that spoke of ambition, of a deep-seated drive to make her mark on the world. She was never distracted, always moving forward, a force of nature in her own quiet way. Then, one unsettling summer day in 2011, a chilling silence fell over her apartment. It wasn't just a quiet day, it was an unnatural stillness, a void where life used to be. She simply vanished, leaving behind only questions and a growing sense of dread. It started with that pervasive silence. Days stretched into an eternity. No one had seen her. Her car, a familiar sight in the resident parking lot, remained untouched, gathering dust. Her apartment door, usually bustling with the quiet sounds of study or the occasional burst of laughter, was now locked, an ominous stillness emanating from within. Her phone lay on her table, abandoned, a silent testament to her sudden, inexplicable disappearance. Everything about it screamed wrong. We filed a missing person report, a frantic call for someone, anyone, to act, to pierce the shroud of uncertainty. The police came by. They knocked, waited a moment, perhaps a minute, their faces impassive, their gaze detached. And then with an almost dismissive air, they left. No forced entry, they stated flatly. No sign of a struggle. Their words hung in the air, cold and unhelpful. They suggested, with a startling lack of empathy, that she might have taken a break, gone somewhere to clear her head. But a cold dread, a premonition of disaster, settled deep in my stomach. Something felt terribly, unequivocally wrong, a discordant note in the symphony of everyday life. It took 4 agonizing days. 4 days of friends making desperate phone calls, of knocking on doors, of begging authorities, pleading with them to take this seriously, to understand the grave, unspoken danger Lauren might be in, before they finally, reluctantly, initiated a proper, thorough search of the area. And what they found was a horror that would forever stain the collective memory of our quiet apartment complex, a scene ripped from the darkest corners of a nightmare. Lauren's torso was discovered in a trash can just outside the building, a grotesque, unspeakable act of violence that defied comprehension. Her limbs and head were never recovered, vanishing into the abyss of a monstrous depravity, leaving her family with an incomplete, unbearable grief. Police soon turned their attention finally to her neighbor, Stephen McDaniel. The man who had walked among us smiled, nodded, and concealed a monstrous secret. He'd given a chilling, almost theatrical interview on live television, his face a mask of feigned concern, his voice laced with manufactured sympathy, all while Lauren's desecrated remains were just feet away, hidden in plain sight, a silent accusation against his chilling composure. It turned out he'd broken into her apartment days before the murder, watching her sleep, a predator lurking in the shadows of her own home, planning his horrific act. He'd worn a mask, a crude disguise that hinted at a deeper, more disturbing pathology. He'd used a key he'd secretly stolen, a chilling testament to his premeditation. He waited, and then with a horrifying precision, a cold-blooded calculation, he killed her. He kept silent through the entire investigation, a stone-faced enigma, his eyes betraying nothing. No one suspected him, not initially. He was just a quiet neighbor, a fixture of the building. It was only when internet sleuths, those relentless digital detectives who crowdsourced justice, pointed out the disturbing inconsistencies in his TV interviews, his awkward pauses, his forced expressions, that police finally, reluctantly looked close. They followed the digital breadcrumbs that ordinary citizens, driven by a thirst for justice, had laid out. The delay in searching, the glaring lack of urgency, the initial dismissal of our fears had allowed a cunning, calculating killer to stay hidden, to walk among us, to breathe the same air in plain sight for days after his horrific crime. Precious time was lost. Time that might have led to a swifter apprehension, perhaps even a chance to prevent further desecration. The chilling truth is, Lauren had asked police months earlier about safety concerns in the area, a vague but palpable sense of unease she couldn't quite articulate, but instinctively felt. She felt watched, perhaps, or simply vulnerable in a way she couldn't explain. She reached out, seeking reassurance, seeking a watchful eye from those sworn to protect. But like too many others, her fear was written off. Her instincts were dismissed as mere anxiety, and the system designed to protect the innocent, to serve and to safeguard, failed her utterly. Her cries for help were swallowed by indifference, lost in the bureaucratic shuffle, only to resurface later as a tragic, irrefutable condemnation. When Derek and Maria Broaddus bought their dream home in 2014, a magnificent Dutch colonial in Westfield, New Jersey, with sprawling lawns and sun-dappled rooms, they envisioned a perfect life. This wasn't just a house, it was the foundation of their future, a place where memories would be forged, where laughter would echo through the halls. They were ready to settle down, to plant roots, to watch their 3 children grow within its beautiful walls, to finally claim their piece of the American dream. Just days after closing the sale, before the moving boxes were even unpacked, before the last scent of fresh paint had faded, the first letter arrived. It was innocuous enough on the surface, a plain envelope, no return address, just a simple, chilling greeting that belied the terror it contained. Dear new neighbor at 657 Boulevard, allow me to welcome you to the neighborhood. It was signed, The Watcher. The words were polite, almost benign, yet they were delivered with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel, cutting into their newfound peace. The letter wasn't a warm welcome. It was a violation. It wasn't just an intrusion. It was an invasion of their most intimate space. It knew intimate details about their family, their children's names uttered with an unnerving familiarity, the layout of their home, details only an insider or a terrifyingly close observer could possibly know. The writer claimed that the house had been the subject of their family's obsession for decades, a legacy of surveillance passed down through generations, and now it was their turn to watch. The Broaddus felt a cold, unseen gaze fixed upon them, even when alone. More letters came, each one more sinister, more invasive, chipping away at their sense of security. Have you found what's in the walls yet? The question hung in the air, a sinister riddle, implying hidden passages, unseen eyes, secret compartments within the very structure of their home. I am pleased to know your children have already begun to play in the basement. A cold shudder ran down Maria's spine. How did they know? How could a stranger know such private details about their children's activities? Their innocent play. The joy of their children's laughter turned into a terrifying, vulnerable sound. It is far away from the rest of the house. If you were upstairs, you would never hear them scream. The words were a direct threat, a promise of unspeakable horror, a chilling blueprint for a crime. It wasn't a warning. It was a blueprint. The Broadduses, reeling from the psychological assault, reported the terrifying threats to police immediately. They brought the letters carefully preserved, their hands trembling, their voices trembling with fear, their pleas urgent, desperate for someone to take their torment seriously. But detectives with a dismissive wave brushed it off as a prank. A sick joke, perhaps from a disgruntled neighbor, a petty squabble escalating. They told the family to install cameras, as if a few lenses could ward off the insidious dread that had seeped into their lives. Nothing more. No serious investigation, no deep dive into the disturbing details contained within those meticulously written letters. Their fear, so palpable to them, was rendered invisible to those meant to protect. They did everything they could. They installed the cameras, their home now bristling with electronic eyes. They reread the letters countless times, searching for clues, for any hint of identity, any tell that would unmask their tormentor. They spoke to neighbors, trying to identify anyone who seemed out of place, anyone with a motive. But the letters kept coming, taunting, growing darker. The psychological toll was immense, crushing. Sleep became impossible, every shadow a potential lurking threat, every sound a possible harbinger of disaster. Eventually, the family was too terrified to move in. Their dream home had become a nightmare, a gilded cage of fear, a monument to their lost peace. They sold the house at a massive loss, their hopes and savings shattered, their dream irrevocably tainted. The police never identified the watcher. DNA on one of the envelopes pointed to a woman, but there was no match in any system, no name to attach to the chilling words. It was a dead end, a cold trail. Indeed, neighbors were interviewed, investigated, even surveilled. Suspicion cast its long shadow over the entire community, but nothing ever stuck. No charges, no answers, just lingering dread, a pervasive sense of unease that still hangs over the quiet streets of Westfield. The watcher still hasn't been caught. And that house at 657 Boulevard, in the quiet, tree-lined streets of Westfield, still stands, a silent, ominous sentinel, waiting for someone new to walk. Its windows, like vacant eyes, stare out, forever guarding a terrifying secret that the authorities could not or would not uncover. It was 2013. Elisa Lamb, a 21-year-old student from British Columbia, Canada, bright, adventurous and full of wanderlust, was traveling alone through California, meticulously documenting her journey online, sharing her experiences with friends and family. It's how quickly her case was closed, how summarily dismissed despite the overwhelming strangeness of the circumstance, how loudly the public screamed for answers, for justice, for truth, for a proper accounting of what happened to this young woman, and how silently the system, the very institution meant to protect and investigate, chose to forget, chose to move on. Chose to bury the truth under a veneer of official closure. In each of these stories, the victims or those who cared for them reached out. They reported the danger. They followed the rules. They asked for help desperately, unequivocally, their voices trembling with fear and urgency. And still the system failed them. The silence that followed their cries was deafening, a testament to breakdowns in communication, to systemic apathy, to overworked departments, or perhaps to something far more insidious, a deliberate turning away from uncomfortable truths. If there's a lesson here, a haunting truth whispered from the shadows of these tragedies, it's this. Sometimes the real horror isn't what hides in the shadows, the monstrous figures lurking in our nightmares. It's how long it takes for the lights to come on, how long it takes for someone to truly listen, how long it takes for help to arrive. And sometimes, terrifyingly, devastatingly, it never does. And in that terrifying absence, the darkness wins.